Good evening and welcome to the March 18th, 2019 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2 is public participation. Anyone that would like to speak from the public, please state your name and address for the record. And since there are no students, I don't have to go through the rest of it.
Good evening. Finley Rothaus, 14 Kidridge Lane. And Andy did suggest that I stop by just to quickly tell you that there's a small committee together that is put together a fundraiser for the MYA celebrating their 50 years of existence. And it's celebrating 50 years of volunteers. The happening is at the Beer Garden at Anheuser-Busch, May 18th from 6 until 9 p.m. It's $30 per ticket, and the money predominantly is going to be used for the kids who have a little bit more difficult time affording to participate in the MYA, and then some of it will also go to the maintenance of the building, but the large chunk will be going to the kids. So if anybody's interested, May 18th, it's a 3-hour event. They have Ed Garrity is a student from Merrimack School Systems who is a speaker, who goes around publicly speaking, and he'll be there that evening, and they're anticipating at least one athlete who lives locally to be there as well. And I don't know if that's firm yet, but anyhow, it should be a fun night, and I appreciate you letting me have this opportunity. Thanks.
Finley, where can they go to get tickets for this?
Oh, of course. They're going to be giving them to the coaching staff of the MYA, so it'll be going around a lot that way. You can contact me at 494-0893, and the tickets will be around that way. There's the email address for contact information, if you'd like, is I'll probably spell it. It's erin.rothaus@gmail.com. It's erin.rothhaus@gmail.com, and she can make that connection as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Finley. If anyone else would like to speak under public participation, seeing none, we will close public participation. Item number 3 is a legislative update. We have no legislators in the audience tonight, so we will close legislative updates. And we will go on to item number 4, which is the initial presentation regarding the high school athletic turf field design. So I invite to the table Bradley, Ms. Kita. Did I do it? Was I really close? Oh, excellent. Sure. And then Matt, I'll let you introduce.
Yeah, sure. This is in response to the petition warrant article that was officially, after the deliberative session, approved to be on the ballot for a renewal of the Merrimack High School football, soccer field behind the high school to replace the current grass field that's there with an artificial surface field. And Brad is from the company of Ty and Bond. They design these systems all over New Hampshire, all over the United States. They're really large engineer and environmental specialist, and Brad's here to give us an idea of what the possibilities could be if this does indeed pass. And then at some other time, probably after the vote, we'll have another meeting, maybe get together with the parents offline to kind of discuss these things as far as, to firm up specifications so we can go out to bid. So Brad is here to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what he has right now, and then a couple of options that you may want to consider. He also has samples here so you can look at the systems and look at the material and see what the items are all about. So without further ado, Brad.
How's that?
Green light and bring it in. Yeah.
There you go. So just yell at me if we're repeating everything you know, but we'll start kind of from the beginning of what synthetic turf does for you. In the synthetic world, there's a couple different types of fields out there. The kind that you would be looking for would be a field with rubber infill for it, or some other type of infill. The reason you're looking for a synthetic are, a couple of main reasons. One, trying to keep grass on your existing field with the amount of use that you get is tough. In addition, it gets hard over time because all the soil gets compacted. It's an ongoing maintenance thing for any school district in New England. Secondly, you play several different sports, several at the same time of year. Football and soccer certainly play in the fall. You have lacrosse in the spring, coinciding with your track season. So there's a lot going on in that one little area. Another reason people will go to synthetic is for concussion protocols. As fields get older, they do get harder. One thing that synthetic is moving towards is they have very strict standards on what they use as a reference is a Gmax number. Gmax is basically the amount of impact somebody's head or whatnot when it makes a collision with the turf. What's that rebound effect? How hard is that compared to, a standard? And they have come up with, maximum levels that are acceptable before you'll have some kind of a critical injury. And we can measure that certainly with a synthetic field. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in a few minutes here. When we're looking at a field like you're looking at, which is a multi-use main game field, is going to be used by many different sports, all of which have their own idiosyncrasies on what they're looking for on the field. We take that into account as we're looking at what kind of a design we would look at for your particular use. One type of synthetic is what they call slit film. It's a blade of grass, so to speak, is a flat piece of polypropylene that they actually cut down, becomes two blades of grass. Works very well. Football. Several pro teams will use 100% slit film fields. They like it because the fibers themselves actually lay over and traps that rubber infill within the turf system. If you're watching the NFL on Sundays, you see somebody make a catch on the sideline, all of a sudden you'll see this little puff of black rubber or whatnot, whatever they're using for infill. That's what they call the splash. And the slit film kind of folds over to kind of hold that down. Another type of fiber out there is what they call monofilament. And that is each blade of grass on that particular type of carpet has almost a little spine to it, so that it sticks up very straight, looks very lifelike. Soccer loves it because it lets a soccer player's foot get underneath the ball, get a little more lift. It holds the ball up a little bit. But those are very specialized for certain sports, certain times where you're playing everything. I would recommend going with a hybrid system, which is a combination of slit film and monofilament. You kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a better looking field, you get holding down that infill a little bit on you, and you get the monofilament which stands up straight and hopefully gives you a little more lift on the ball. In addition to that, I would recommend going with a shock pad underneath the carpet. Going back to that, the idea of concussions and Gmax rating, by using a shock pad underneath the synthetic turf, we would, if we pick the ones that I would be recommending, certain brands of shock pads, they come with guarantees that will say over so many years, your Gmax will never go above a certain value. That protects the students, protects the school from any liability concerns if an injury did happen out there. But it's certainly the way I would recommend going in today's world. Probably 5-6 years ago, they weren't using shock pads. And that has certainly taken a drastic turn in the synthetic turf world in the last few years. That being said, I did bring samples of shock pads. I did bring samples of monofilament, slit film, hybrid systems. So if we want to actually pick it up and touch it, we can do that now, or we can do it later. Just let me know how you want to play it.
If while you're talking, if you want to pass it down, we can multitask.
pads underneath on your base material. I'm going to use the hybrid one instead of. Look closely, you'll be able to see this fiber in there, and it has. So if you can visualize, that turf system would go on top of the shock pad. So what we're showing you here is a cross-section of what we'd be looking at. Essentially, you'd be excavating out your existing material that's on your field right now, coming back with an under-drain system, coming back with a stone layer. The stone layer acts as your drainage layer. On top of that, we'd go with the shock pad and then the synthetic turf on top of that. So we're basically building a sandwich. The whole idea of these turf systems is water goes vertical through them, goes down into a flex underneath the field, and then drains. So the beauty of a synthetic field versus what you have today is if you got 3 inches of rain the night before a big game, chances are you're probably not playing on your field the next day. Synthetic field, you could play 20 minutes after the rain stopped. That's really the beauty. There's several school districts in the state that we've done work with that I'll drive by their fields and I'll look out in the fields, and neither one of those two teams are from that school. It's because their fields were in poor condition and they actually had to go someplace else to play their field, play their game because their fields were not operable. Again, just kind of showing you what this might look like from sideline to sideline, or from one edge of the track all the way to the other edge of the track. Excavating down 6 to 12 inches, coming back with, a lot of crushed stone, grading that out, coming back with your shock pad, and then on top of that, the turf that we end up selecting. Something that we want to discuss based on what you have out in your particular field is you already have your track in place. And yes, this is not your school. This is one that we did a couple years ago, but I wanted to bring it to point out a couple things. So your track's in place on one end, which we'll call a D zone, which is the area you see in red on either end. Kind of looks like a D, so D zones. On one end, you have a pole vault runway, and on the other end, you have a discus circle. The question that we've asked, and it was told to bring it to tonight for discussion, was if we come into the middle of the field and come in with synthetic on those D zones, how do we want to leave those ends? We could come back and do it in a latex similar to your track surface, which this is one we did up at Oyster River, which had the latex D zones. You can see on the one at the bottom of the page, that's where their pole vault is, which would be similar to what you have out there. And then on the far end would just be your discus circle. But that would be similar to if we went with latex. Now, another one we did, this is using synthetic all the way through on the D zones. And you can see very similar on the left-hand side, you can actually see they have a discus pad very similar to what you would have. And your pole vault would be on the other end, similar to where this one actually had a high jump area. So those are some of the things that we're trying to evaluate on how your particular system would lay out. The other issue we're designing around is we understand that you just resurfaced your track in the last 3 or so years. What we need to construct in order to have the synthetic is we need a anchor around the exterior. So right up against your track, we need an anchor, which is typically call it a concrete curb, of which when you roll out the synthetic, that gives them something to adhere to on the sides. So we would have that all the way around. So that's what's going to allow your synthetic to go all the way to the track surface. The third option, obviously, is just to leave it in grass. So those are some direction that we would be looking for from your perspective. There's pluses and minuses to each. For instance, if we were going with a latex system on the D zones, that works well for track in the spring when it's generally damp, it's cold, it's, we just got spring melt, and if they're having a meet, it gives the athletes someplace to kind of lay down without getting wet. So they can put their stuff down. If you go with synthetic turf similar to what we have here, then it's very uniform. You don't end up with that additional area of latex, more impervious. It's obviously going to increase your costs in the future when you go to resurface again. There's those type of issues. And then if we went with grass, the biggest benefit there is it's cheaper. You're doing nothing to that area. The downside is now I'm dragging in mowers just to do those little areas and trying to keep the clippings off the track and off the synthetic surface. So pluses, minuses either way. But certainly that we would need that direction as we go forward, with any design, just to make sure we lay it out. And then something else to think about is when we do a new field, what lines do we want on the field? And of those lines, do we want them sewn in or tufted in into the surface so they're permanent? Or does the school district want to look at having them painted on a yearly basis? Obviously, there's a little bit of a cost to having the lines put in, and once they're in, they're in. Painting's a little cheaper up front, but you're going to pay for it over time. And then the other thing to think about is, logos, and center logos. This one that you're looking at actually has end zone letters. There's all kinds of things you can do from that standpoint. That's when we start laying out the final painting of the field or tufting of the field. That's the easy part. But figuring out just what you want that look to be at the end of the day. That's kind of where we're at. We're looking for some direction. We know we've already kind of started designing the under drain system, trying to move that forward. I understand with your town vote coming up, that'll give direction on where this is going, and should it pass, the idea would be to get going this year. That being said, for that to happen, this is going to require a state permit, which we need to get submitted to give time to get it back so that you can get going when you want to. We really can't afford to wait. That's why we're proceeding ahead. We want to move that as quick as possible. So that's kind of what I have for now. Any questions before?
I'll open up to the board. Are there questions from the board? Andy?
So you mentioned of the D zone options. Obviously, leaving it grass is the cheapest because it's there.
Because you're not doing anything, correct?
If you compare the latex to the synthetic, is there a cost difference?
Latex will be more expensive. When I go latex on these D zones, where the red part of the D zone meets up with the track on the curve, because your existing track, everything pitches to the inside of towards the field. Your D zones would pitch out towards the track. So in that area, right on your inside lane line, would be required for us to put in a sport drain, which is essentially a small, thin trench drain. So you'd have that cost going around either end, not to mention bringing in all the select gravels, the pavement, and then the spraying of the latex to match the rest of your track. That's going to be a little bit more expensive than just going synthetic or obviously leaving it grass.
Okay.
Okay, I have Brandy, then Cinda.
Our track is black, so when we look at ours, I just want
Everything in red would be black,
everything in red would be black.
unless
so
you want to do something crazy, but
no,
yes.
no, for sure. So when you're looking at the picture and it's a nice shade of red, ours would be black, and I personally think that that's a significant amount of black for the field. But even outside of that, I think and really even outside of the cost, I prefer, me personally, just my thoughts are to have the turf extend in the D zones.
So you like it like that?
Correct.
Okay.
And just to, as far as some of the talking points that you were mentioning, as far as needing clarity on, my 2 cents would be that we would not paint the lines, but that we would have them in permanently.
Which is exactly what you're looking at there.
That would require some feedback from you as to how we, how many lines we have and what sports we want. But I imagine that we would want to include the major ones that we have most participants in. But that side area could be utilized even for, stretching or practicing or,
Absolutely.
passing a ball back and forth or lacrosse back and forth. So I think I would want to, my thought here would be that we utilize that space with turf, but also for, additional practice surface. You also wanted thoughts surrounding the end, correct? We needed to have an understanding of how we go up against the track, or when we go with this turf all the way around and we don't do the latex D zones.
If we're going with synthetic, it becomes pretty
Clear.
straightforward.
Okay, perfect. So that would be my 2 cents on where we go with that. My only other question that I have is how long, once we get the permit, how long does this honestly take to do from start to finish?
A field like this with the under drain system, I would say you're probably looking at 3 months.
3 months.
And at the beginning, it's not as critical, but as it gets into certain areas of construction, then those become weather dependent as well. So for instance, if we're starting to infill, they don't like to do that in the rain. So if we get a week of rain and they're at that stage where they're trying to infill the carpet, that might cause a hiccup too. So just timing wise,
Okay,
there are certain things that are weather dependent when they do installation.
for sure, definitely. Okay, thank you.
Cinda?
I guess my question is if any of these options are that we would have to decide on would be covered with the warrant article. If everything in the most expensive form would still be covered by the warrant article, or if we're at risk with yay or nay on some of these, if we put ourselves at risk of putting us over that amount that's going to the voters.
Well, we received a budget number from one of the larger companies before talking with Brad to get to a point as far as the price point. We looked at other districts too that put in these types of fields, and the $1.2 million range, we felt comfortable that if you wanted to do the latex D zones, which are more costly, let me just say what that is. You'd be excavating down and you'd be paving that entire area first. And then you'd spray on the latex material just like the track. So when Brandy was saying, that's a lot of black, that's exactly what it is. It's a bunch of asphalt, it's black. So in talking with Tom, we personally, that's exactly what I said. It's a lot of black. We prefer the grass all the way. So that cuts the price down a little bit, or the cost. But, that's something that would still be within the range, I believe, once we go out to bid.
Okay. I tend to agree with Brandy's comments, definitely about permanently spraying. I mean, I think my take is if we're going to do it right and do it in a way that it'll last as long as possible and provide the best value and safety for our students. But I wouldn't want to make that decision without getting your input, and just as important, Mike Susi's input, because this is all under his domain of the athletes. So I definitely want him to weigh in for us.
Well, there's been a lot of conversation going on back and forth. And everything on this project is all going to be laying on Mike Susi's head, so.
Yeah.
He's been an integral part of the discussions. And one of the sports, we're looking at 4 sports, Mike? 4, right. But one of them is, I think, lacrosse, yeah, lacrosse. And there's the possibility the dimensions may change for that field, for the NHIAA.
There's a lot of variability.
Can you come to?
Yeah, he's got to come to the mic and introduce himself.
It's just a matter of time.
Mike Susi, athletic director, please.
In charge of the turf field, if it passes.
Yes. There's a lot of variability in lacrosse fields as far as the dimensions go currently, as far as the length goes for the girls' field, as far as the width goes for the boys' field, is a lot of variability. And our feeling in the lacrosse community is that at some point in time, they may standardize it. And what I wouldn't want to see is us have permanent lines sewn in to a field that has the potential of being changed 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, and now we're stuck with these permanent lines, and we're going to have to paint anyway. So for that one sport, girls and boys lacrosse, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we have those lines sewn in. I would recommend that we paint those. But for field hockey, for soccer, and for football, we would certainly want them sewn in because those dimensions haven't changed in forever, and there's no talk of that.
So,
That works for me.
yeah,
Just
so
to
the
remember-
items that have been stable, we were thinking about painting them, I'm not painting them, having them sewn in. And then for the item that's a variable, what you can spec out is I found out in talking with Brad that you can have little tick marks put in your field. So when you go to line, you can just follow those, because part of the labor in lining for the other sports is, you know, measuring out and making sure everything is perfect, whatever. But if these tick marks are in the field, then you could just connect them up and just run with it. It's a lot easier that way. So we're thinking about going that route.
And just to follow on what was just talked about is, that's not an atypical thing to do. On some of these, we've had certainly where we have sewn in the football, soccer, field hockey, and sometimes we even do boys lacrosse. Girls lacrosse seems to be the most up in the air right now. So that's one that several schools have decided not to sew in, and they'll just come in and paint that in the spring for them. But we can certainly do it either way.
So that makes complete sense to me, which is, I think, to the point of why it makes sense for us all to have the conversation, so.
Brandy?
One concern that I have is the duration of time that it takes. 3 months is, how do we make that happen with football starting in beginning of August and soccer? Well, soccer isn't currently being played, so I don't know how, on that field, I should say. But I'm not sure how we would make that work. So do we have a plan in place at this time, or any thoughts surrounding how we make a 3-month timeline fit?
Well, that is rather challenging. Do we have a plan right now? I'll be honest with you, not a, absolute one. Bless you. We'd have to see if we could start as early as possible. And I don't know if there's any accommodations that we could have our home games for football if the field isn't done at the Bedford fields that are over there we use for soccer, something.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to play football over there. It's not a football stadium, so they don't have goalposts and things like that. So, but we do have a little bit of a good news in that the season has been pushed back a little bit as far as the start dates go for this upcoming season. So we actually don't have any home games for any sport prior to school starting. So we do have the entire month of August, and in reality, we don't practice on that field anyway. That has always been strictly a game field. Doesn't mean we wouldn't practice on it if we had artificial turf at times, but I have a feeling that it'll be pretty readily utilized for games between all of the sports, in particular in the fall. But we do have a little bit of leeway in there this upcoming season because the start date for games is pushed out a little bit later.
My question was around warranty versus expected life. We have a long-standing tradition in Merrimack of basically keeping things way longer than they should ever exist, to the point where that we outlast the manufacturer sometimes. And so with that, what's the warranty on the field and what's the expected life on the field?
Typical warranty on the carpet itself is generally 8 years for just about every manufacturer out there. The shock pad underneath varies a little bit, but they typically go for 2 life cycles, so say 16 years. And your expected use for what I would expect for a typical high school multi-use field in New Hampshire, 12 years on the low end. And I've seen people, I was just thinking the other day, we did Exeter High School back in the day, and that was 2006, and they're getting ready to replace theirs right now. So, kind of gives you an idea, and that one gets
Yep.
used pretty extensively.
Let's think Bedford didn't open until 2007, so I'm wondering if they've even returfed since then.
They're
In the
working
budget.
on that this year.
Yeah, so they're about the same time frame.
There you go. Okay, that was my question. Are there any other questions while we have Brad and Mike here?
One of the, I got one
Oh,
more- I got one
absolutely.
more for you.
Sure.
The pole vault runway in one of your D zones. Obviously, it exists there. For us to leave it there and go synthetic like we're talking, we would need to put that concrete curb around the entire thing, so when the turf comes up to the side of it, we have a place to adhere the turf surrounding it. Not impossible, but certainly adds a little layer of effort. The question would be whether or not there was an opportunity to relocate that pole vault runway outside of the track.
I'm going to learn to play poker and play against Mike Susie sometime. So I don't know the layout specs of a pole vault. I'm going to ask you if you could take that.
Yeah, to be honest, without really scoping out
No,
the
and
area.
I sprung this on you. but-
Yeah, no, it's okay. Without scoping out the area a little bit more and what our needs would be for the pole vault, I think that would be a difficult ask because we're pretty locked from a land perspective in that back area anyway. We've got our other 2 jumping pits on the far end of the track. I don't know where else we would put it.
And the third lane of the highway is going to impact.
Correct.
From the other
that
side.
other side. Yep.
The one area I did look was off the end of your straightaway, but I believe, if my memory serves correct, you have utility wires down there that we probably
Yep.
probably don't want to be jumping right up there.
No.
Just saying.
Okay, so that would be
So we can work around it. It's just
something to address.
trying to make something easier if we could have.
You bet. So, any other questions? I think we're good for now. So, in April 9th, I think will tell us how good we are.
Exactly.
It's Unicorn Day, so we'll see what that, according to my calendar, we'll see what that means.
I'm not sure what that
So,
means.
thank you both for coming. And we are on to item number 5, which is the board's response to the school district's operating budget. And with that, at our last deliberative, our only deliberative session this year, so our deliberative session on the 5th, we had a change in the bottom line to our budget, which is not what we voted on last time. So right now, we don't have a favorable position on our operating budget, and it's based on a number that's different than what exists today. So in your packets, you have the new and amended operating budget of $77,654,036. And with that, we need to take an amended vote because this is a different number than we voted on last time, and actually more comparable to the time before. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion to, Andy, I'll just let you go with it.
I move that we vote in favor of support of recommending the modified proposed budget of $77,654,036.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Brandy. Any questions or comments to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this was, I applaud Naomi's, her motion and the way she so aptly discussed and talked about all the different pros. I'm personally disappointed that the budget committee was even split on this because essentially what they're doing is recommending that the town spend more money than what we're proposing, which, we'll leave it up to the voters I mean, we saw a little bit of that at the deliberative session. What's interesting is that the vote, there were only 2 votes against the amendment and everybody else in favor, but yet the budget committee, there were 4 votes against it. So to me, it's confusing, but whatever. But anyway, this gets us back to where we were as a school board, so I'm fully in support of it.
So with that, are there any other questions or comments to the motion? We'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0. On to item number 6, which is the second review of the proposed 2019-2020 school calendar, including the review of parent responses. At our last meeting, we talked about how we will be putting out a survey to parents. And with that, we did get 825 responses. I am passing down the results that we can review. And with that, I did get 6, technically, emails. So 5 were with specific requests. The 6th was someone who missed the window for the survey because her company's spam filter caught the survey and threw it in the spam filter. So with that, we did get 3 parents that wanted 1 vacation week over 2 weeks. And I think based on that, it seems to be a consistent, not that we get what I would call an overwhelming number, but it seems to be the consistent ask. The thing that comes up with 1 vacation week, which I think is not known to most parents, is that any student that we send to Nashua North, Nashua South, or Alvern for technical education classes would miss three weeks of instruction in the 2nd semester based on those 2 weeks turning into 1 week. So the 2 weeks that those schools are closed, and then the 1 week hours would be closed in the middle. So I just want that to kind of be out there. But that was the 1 request. 1 asked about the questions that were about daycare and access to the internet, and the parent basically said, I think you're trying to ask me about Blizzard bags, and I just want to let you know now I'm opposed. So without, and then another asking to set the graduation date in advance of, which is actually tonight's meeting, but to set it at the beginning of the school year. So then there's only 1 other, and it was more of a clarifier that had we offered choosing one over the other, so would you rather have December 23rd and 24th off or January 2nd and 3rd off? We would prefer that to be asked. But it's totally fine with 2 solid weeks of Christmas break. So that was all the feedback, and it totaled 6 emails. So of the 825 responses, we'll go through question by question. So do you support having no school on Columbus Day? We had 420 responses as yes and 405 as no. We knew that's historically the closest one. Do you support having no school the Wednesday before Thanksgiving? Yes, I support having no school before Thanksgiving, 618, no, 207. Do you support having no school on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is January 20th of 2020? 479 said yes, they support having no school. 346 are opposed to keeping school closed. Number 4, do you support having no school on President's Day, recognizing the following week is February vacation? 199 supported having no school, and then 626 did not support having no school on President's Day, and that was what I would call a unique data point, inconsistent with prior years, very inconsistent with prior years. Question number 5, in the proposed calendar, schools closed on Monday, December 23rd and Tuesday, December 24th. Do you support school being closed on December 23rd? If no, the school year in June will be reduced by 1 day. Yes was 571, no 254. So they support school being closed. Item number 6, that was my fault. I put that in as a copy paste in error. So, shocker, it's overwhelmingly, do you support school being closed on December 24th? 792 said yes and 33 said no. So that was my error, and I apologize for that. Item number 7, in the proposed calendar, school is due to reopen from holiday recess on Thursday, January 2nd for a 2-day school week. With January 1st occurring on a Wednesday, would you be in favor of extending holiday recess through Friday, January 3rd, resuming classes on January 6th? If yes, this would extend the school year by 2 days. 314 were in favor of extending it to 2 days, 511 were opposed. Item number 8, in the proposed calendar, teacher workshops are scheduled to be held prior to the first day of school. The first day of school is currently scheduled the day after Labor Day. Are you in support of continuing this scheduling structure? 738 want to start after Labor Day, and 87 do not. And then I have some data collection that we're using for, of course, as, you know, parents ask us about Blizzard bags, that we're making data-driven informed decisions. So item number 9, how many students do you have in the Merrimack School District? 338 had 1, 368 had 2, 88 had 3, and 31 had 4 or more. What level or school are they in? So we had amongst them, and of course it's not going to add up to the number because you have multiple answers. 452 have elementary kids, 217 in upper elementary, 224 in middle, and 302 in high school. Do you have internet access in your home? 821 do, 4 do not. How many devices so that's computers, laptops, or tablets do you have that students can use for schoolwork? 10 have 0, 126 have 1, 248 have 2, 156 have 3, and 285 have 4 or more. And then item number 13, if school is closed, are your students taken to a child care facility? 88 said yes, 737 said no. And if yes, does the facility have resources, internet and computers your children can use to complete schoolwork? 69 said yes, and 156 said no. So with that, we have the data points to look at finalizing our calendar. The one I think we want to, oh, Marge, please do. I would love it.
Thank you. So the board also asked that I make some contact with surrounding districts, and specifically, it was trying to find out if they operated on 180 days and also just about their holiday recess. So I want you to know you have some calendars in your packet and other calendars the districts were not ready to release because they were still being decided. So the districts that were contacted were Bedford, Derry, Hudson, Nashua, Pelham, Salem, and Amherst. And every school system, 6 out of 7 are taking the winter holiday or the holiday recess from December 23rd to January 1st, with 6 out of 7 coming back and being in session on the 2nd and 3rd. And all of the ones that I talked about are 180 days. So that gives you just a sense, and when you looked at the calendars, you could see how they match or not to us, but they're pretty close, really. Mm-hmm.
And thank you. Are there any other questions? Indy?
So one of the things that I noticed that I should have caught, but I don't think any of us did, is that the school year coming up has a presidential primary in it in January. And if you notice, about half of the school districts that you sent us the calendars on have a placeholder in February per the recommendation of the state Secretary of State to be a placeholder. The question I had is, given that, bless you, given that this presidential primary is likely to be fairly active, as they tend to be, does the Merrimack School District need to be closed like we do during a presidential election or a national election every 2 years in November?
And I would just respond, I haven't had that conversation with Lynn Christensen. However, she's usually pretty good about telling us when she's concerned, and clearly the presidential election in 2020 would be something to watch out for. That would be November of 2020,
Right,
the
it's just
following year.
But the primary, but
Mhm.
in this year, the primary is,
I realize that. I'm just saying she
Yeah, I
has
know.
not pointed that out. Now, that certainly could be asked of her if necessary, but she has not pointed that out.
I would, rather than assuming that she knows, I would vote that we ask her to find out.
I think we can just give a, what I'll call a request to the superintendent to reach out.
Right,
So-
because, but also notifying that if she does say yes, also know that it would be a date that we might choose, but it would need to be flexible, because as we know, it's, until they set the date, we don't know what the date is, so Because we did this a couple of years, or 3 years ago, I think, or whenever it was last time, so.
Yeah. And Naomi, did your hand up? Oh, okay. So with that, we'll have the superintendent reach out to Lynn Christensen regarding expectations for the presidential primary. When it comes to that, as far as traffic is concerned, I think that, if we choose to have school open, I think we will definitely want to have a strategy meeting at our meeting to talk about how we, segregate the students from the general population. And if we choose to not have school, then I think the sooner we can, as a board, determine that to be the best answer, the best. So even if we finalize the calendar tonight, we can look at this as a, as I hate to say this, I'm not going to use a term, I'm snow day type thing. So if it seems like it's the thing we have to add to the calendar at a later date, I think we always have the flexibility to do that based on what's best for the students. Cinda?
I mean, I wonder if we could finalize it with just like an asterisk, a notation that, maybe on the month of November, that please note, there may be one day in November that.
It'd be February for the primary.
February, sorry.
Sorry, it's all right.
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Andy?
Do we have to finalize it tonight? Can we wait till the next meeting till we get the data and then make it final so there's not an asterisk or
I
a
think
pending or something?
that would be fine. And I think then the other thing is that the one thing that seems to be an overriding decision is we'll start the day after Labor Day anyway. So I think that's the most important thing for parents to know is when to start school. And that, and I think if we do have the discussion about the survey tonight, I think that would just make for a very quick discussion next time. And the one thing that stands out is that President's Day, and that was a shocker because it's usually overwhelming the flip side to say, I want President's Day open because I have all next week off. So that was a shocker.
Doesn't that what it say? Maybe it's just been a long day for me. You support having no school, and the majority said,
They don't support having no school. They support having school,
right.
which is a shocker.
Well, but that means that we leave it open. They were in support of not taking a day then and then the whole next week off, right? Which is what we've done, right?
And
Like I say, it's been a long day and there's a lot of double negatives.
there
in this
are,
question,
and
so-
honestly, I haven't had solid food in a week because my stomach is not right now. So if I may have missed it. Yes,
I'm wondering whether people might have misunderstood the question.
I'm misunderstanding it now and I wrote it. But we've had the same question for 4 years, which concerns me.
So, do you support having no school on President's Day? And the answer was no.
Right.
They don't support no school, which means
They
they
want,
support having school, which is what we've done every year.
okay, so I did do it right.
So it
Wow.
shouldn't be a shocker, I
My
don't think.
My bad. So I just talked myself into it. So I apologize. Anyone that's had to live on Jell-O for a week will understand what I'm going through tonight. But so I guess it's not a shocker. It's exactly what we expected, and it's consistent. So my bad, guys. Wow. So I know. Trust me, that's not going to take a lot. So I do apologize for the confusion. So Cinda and Brandy.
I was just going to say, I'm just surprised how split it is on Columbus Day, that it's the 420 to 405.
I think Columbus Day has a couple of plays that go into it that have a little to do with the holiday, and I think most of it does not have to do with the holiday. Columbus Day is a huge weekend that families use for, like when you're into the sophomore, junior year, senior year for college visits. The other thing for the younger students is there's an enormous soccer soccer tournament out of Nashua. That's the 3 days. So any kids that would make it to the third day of that tournament would be in it and would miss school to be in a soccer tournament. So I think, again, a lot of the feedback that we get may have some of that filtered into it, and it may be a little less about the holiday.
And just, I'll chime in that, how many years ago was it? 4 years ago?
I remember.
We-
There was a lot of backlash.
We decided to have school on Columbus Day. It was an experiment, sort of, to bucket. And there were many, there were many
Yes.
bad experiences after that, right?
Yes,
So-
it did not. We did get a lot, and actually, that was probably one of the. That's when we started really getting into the survey as well. So that was the precipice for it, but it is very divided. So, but we know why. So it's more self-serving than necessarily the holiday itself, but it's needed for those external reasons.
Well, and some people may not recognize, what that means.
Right.
They're thinking it on the basis of the holiday, not, do their kids have, I think when we closed that one, when we were open that one Columbus Day, it affected like music, I felt like it affected band, it affected sports, it was a pretty,
Yeah, there are a number of things.
yeah.
I want to say it was I don't know if it was solo tryouts it was a couple years ago. Yeah, no, so a lot of externals. So with that, do we feel comfortable with, I'm sorry, Brandy, I totally forgot. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So it was brought up briefly in the very beginning, but I don't know enough about the subject to really weigh in heavily. But I can see why some parents might want to set the date for graduation prior to the year starting, so having it on the calendar just for planning purposes and extended family in different locations. Is that something that we can do in the future moving forward, or what is there? I don't know enough about it, so
So it's predicated on the number of days and/or instructional hours that you have for the senior class, and you have to make sure you meet that. So I think this year it's helped a great deal. We've not had any call to this point because we put on the calendar for the first time when the topic would be discussed. So that if we did it in March, that would give parents and families a good amount of time for a plane ticket or whatever. If we set it too far in advance and we didn't meet the hours, then it's about petitioning the state and so on. It becomes more complicated. So this year seems to have been a better outcome because we actually highlighted when we were going to talk about it as compared to waiting till the end of April or whatever. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to continue with this just to see how this works. But to this point, people seem to be quite pleased because tonight we're going to have outcome.
And I think the other thing that came out of that a couple of years ago was that if, God forbid, we did have another situation where we had so many snow days, and we had set the date that we'd actually have to confer graduation and mail diplomas.
And risk that somebody that walked may not graduate.
Correct.
And that's the risk that you have.
Yep. Naomi?
Switch of topic, just a quickie on numbers 13 and 14 for whether children go to childcare facilities. I'm noticing that the yeses were 88, but far more than 88 answered number 14, so we may want to pay attention to that when we use that information.
Okay. Thank you. My research scientist. So that's where we're at. So with Andy?
You actually, there was a third answer to that question, and that's, I don't know. Because how many parents really know if their daycare center has internet access or not?
Right.
So, you had the full boat that asked yes or no on childcare, but very few answered yes or no because they probably just didn't know.
Right. And then also, I think we have the NA. Yep. So I think there's an NA option as well we can use going forward as well. So we've used a couple different tools, but I do love how we can get, very quick compilable data. So that's been a plus the last 3 years. So I've been happy with that. So with that, we will put the calendar on our agenda for next time, get feedback from Lynn Christensen regarding expectations for presidential primaries and how that will guide the final decision. So we're on to number 7, speaking of graduation dates. And our student at the end wants to stay until just June 29th, and we'll let him. It's okay. No? Okay, just checking. So Marge, I'll turn it over to you.
Surely. So we have done a calculation of days and hours, and the high school principal has conferred with us, and so we are requesting that graduation be on Saturday, June 8th at 10 a.m. on Student Memorial Field. And of course, all of you are invited, and we hope that you will all be able to attend on that day, that very special day.
Excellent. The reason for the season, they say. We're on to item number 8, which is the third quarter curriculum review, and I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. So tonight I want to just begin wetting your whistle on a couple of things that we've been working on. I'm going to preface by saying that you're going to hear a lot more about both of these things in coming, months. But as a way to leverage tonight, I just wanted to share two things with you particularly so that you'll be prepared when we talk more about it. The first thing is work that our district has been doing on the development of an elementary standards-based report card. So I really want to kind of keep my comments simple tonight because I don't want to step on the toes of the group that'll come to you in the future. But I do want to just share with you that for many years now, as we've been adjusting our curriculum and instruction to meet our standards-based goals, we've been increasingly finding that our reporting mechanisms have been somewhat out of step with our instructional practices. And so the good news is that our instructional practices are growing and changing and being responsive to research and student needs and differentiation and all those things that we so often talk about. So that's the good news. And it's not bad news, but the implication of that is that we have to have a reporting system for parents that kind of matches that allows us to tell that story to parents in a way that matches what we actually do in the classroom. So a group of teachers have been meeting. We've been meeting since December of 2016. So we've already put 2 years of work in, over 100 hours. And the reason that we haven't spoken much about it is that for so much of that time, typical of the way we do things in Merrimack, we've really been doing research. We've been looking extensively at the reporting systems of other districts in New Hampshire, other districts in New England, other districts around the country. And a lot of our meetings over those 2 years and 100 hours have literally been just kind of trying to assess, what is it that other districts do in this regard? Because we've all been up against, trying to have a reporting system that matches standards and so on. We've read some books. We've attended some conferences. We've looked at a lot of articles, a lot of research. And then we've spent a lot of time just trying to decide for ourselves, what is the purpose? What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And so we've really been trying to get our arms wrapped around those questions. The reason that I'm sharing it with you tonight is because it's a curriculum review night, and curriculum and assessment are really aligned, but also because we're getting close to a point now where we have made a few preliminary decisions and we're ready to share it more broadly. What I'll also say is I'm very pleased to tell you that we have a parent group that that have been contacted. They've been folks that have been talked to by Building Leadership, and then people have reached out. So a principal would say, I think this is somebody who's really active in our school. We'd like to tap them. Then word of mouth and other people have contacted. And so we're really going to be convening that group probably in a couple of weeks. And then we'll share with that group what we've accomplished so far and really start getting parent feedback about, does this make sense to you? There are lots of things that we still have to work through, so we're not going to present them. We're not even close to a finished product, but just preliminarily, philosophically, with the kinds of things we're doing, does this make sense to you? Where do you think you need to provide us feedback so that this tool can be useful for you? Go back and talk to friends and neighbors and so on and so forth. So we're going to have that feedback loop too. One of the things that we've really talked about is the purpose of a reporting mechanism. It's a report card, but that connotes something kind of traditional, and this might be something a little different, because one of the things that report cards do is talk about sort of terminal progress. So like you did B's work this quarter, and we've said, kind of for a long time, that leaves a lot of questions unanswered. What does a B kind of mean? Why isn't it an A? Why isn't it a C? And so on and so forth. So what we've really been talking about is using this as a mechanism to report progress. Where is a typical student up against a standard, such that by the end of the year, a typical student in third grade would be here in terms of reading and here in terms of writing. So if it's November, where is the student's progress in that continuum to June? So that parents have some information about whether we're on target, whether we're lagging, whether we're exceeding, and if we're lagging, what are we going to do about it? And if we're exceeding, what are we going to do about it? And so one of the, and we'll say a lot more about this when the team comes together, but one of the things we're playing with is a reporting mechanism that reports progress along a continuum, which is kind of different than saying right now you're a D or you know, whatever. So we're talking about that. There's lots more to talk about. We've also seen a lot of reporting systems that have a different report card for every grade. And we determined that that's kind of untenable. It's really hard to have a separate, especially if you're a parent who has kids in multiple grades, then you have to think, okay, this is Tommy, and Tommy's in third, and that's why we've got the report card that looks like this, but Mary is in fifth, and it looks like this, and it's just too hard. Some districts do that, so preliminarily, we've made a decision that we're not going to do that, with the exception of kindergarten, because kindergarten is just such a different beast, when it comes to just the expectations for learning, that probably will take a different form than 1 through 6. But again, these aren't firm, totally done decisions. This is what we've come to so far, and we're anxious to reach out and get a broader perspective from end users. We've identified reporting standards for each subject. That's not a small thing. If you know the state standards or the college and career-ready standards, there are a lot, and to try to distill from all of the standards for a particular content area, what are the numbers that we're going to sort of report on? So preliminarily, we've talked about 4 to 6. We've talked about ways in which we're going to determine, are we talking about end-of-year standards or where we are at a point in time, at a quarter or at a trimester. So we've worked through that. We have some things in the future that we'll share with you in more detail about our decision-making around that. We've talked about things, one of the informations that we've gathered sort of anecdotally from parents to this point is how much they appreciate comments. But they don't necessarily appreciate the kind of comments where you go and you select 4. And 4 is works well with others. That's under the comment section, but that leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to individualizing. Well, what about Tommy? How does Tommy handle this or that? And so, though we know it's a little bit more labor intensive for teachers, we also recognize that that's going to probably produce some of the goals that we want to achieve, which is greater communication between the teacher and the teacher/school and the parent. And this, by the way, aligns with some of the work that we've done in the communications committee. We see this as probably one of the most important communication tools that we have. And so, however, we're not being cavalier about the amount of effort that takes for a teacher. So part of the work that we're doing is trying to figure out how you can have meaningful comments that don't take teachers, 6 days per child to complete, because that's a real important thing too. And so we are right now, this is a group that's been meeting monthly for 2 years. They're outstanding, and they've really given their all to it. And right now we're close to a first draft of reporting standards for all the content areas, including the unified arts. Many of the districts that we've looked at don't have reporting standards for art, music, PE. And, in Merrimack, we've tried really hard to make sure that those content areas are treated as seriously as every other content, because we know that the whole child benefits when all of those contents are exposed. And so we're really excited about our decision around that. So I don't want to say a lot more because the team, when they come, are going to have more flesh on the bone. But I just wanted to take advantage of tonight to talk to you about the fact that this has been happening, and so that when we talk to you in the near future, that you'll have kind of a framework for understanding some of the more details that they're going to provide. The second
Can
thing,
I
I'm
ask
sorry,
a question on that
please.
really quick?
Please.
It's actually not a question, it's more of a request. So when you come, when the group comes to us to talk more about this, a good data point would be, I mean, you alluded to a couple places about what other districts are or not doing. It would be good to share the research on what a lot of the surrounding districts are doing in this area, so that we have some scope and scale. I mean, obviously Merrimack in many cases goes beyond, but it would be good to see what's going to be consistent with other districts, what they're currently doing versus what they might be planning on doing or things like that, so that we know. And my interest in this is largely because we do see movement from kids within schools in towns around us. So consistency, or at least adaptability between, if a student goes from one to the other, is going to be important. I think a question some parents will ask. So if you could have that data as part of the presentation, that would be really great.
Easily done. Thank you. The other thing that I just wanted to share tonight is, so when I came to Merrimack, we had, my predecessor had worked on the development of something called the Collaborative Assessment Project, or the CAP initiative in literacy. And really that was a wholesale change in the way that we instructed students in all the aspects of literacy. And primarily what it did was it individualized instruction a lot more than it had been in the past. So many of us can remember what would be called basals. So, you were a blue jay, a robin, or, a pigeon, I don't know. and then you were kind of slotted, and then you had sort of instruction based around what level you were at, and you really was pretty inflexible. So once a blue jay, always a blue jay, unless something miracle happened. And so the Collaborative Assessment Project really started to individualize instruction, and so we worked a lot in making sure that we do things like progress monitoring, to be sure that an individual student is moving along a continuum of learning. So since that time, we've added a lot of other data points. We do the STAR assessments, we do Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessments, we do a variety. So over the years, we have really become more sophisticated. But in the time that we've done that, we've also added other programs, Lucy Calkins Writing, for instance, which was something that wasn't part of the original CAP project that started 10 years ago. And the school day hasn't extended in those 10 years. And so one of the things that we are really wanting to kind of do a 10-year dipstick is how faithful have we been to the principles of the Collaborative Assessment Project? Where have additional items that we've asked teachers to include in their curriculum and instruction and their delivery, where have those caused us to have to push out other things that we've been trying to do, and how do we balance all of that? So pulled a team of language arts coordinators, initially language arts coordinators together, and we asked a question: how do we guide and support teachers to effectively implement best practices in literacy, district teaching tools, assessments, and initiatives to foster lifelong readers and writers? So that was kind of our essential question. And we looked at all of the things that were our original goal 10 years ago in the Collaborative Assessment Project. Again, things like conferring with students, periodic assessments, progress monitoring, just right books, understanding your particular reading level, and determining how it is that I'm at that reading level, so a student can be as much an advocate for himself or herself as the teacher would be. Well, I think I'm actually at a C now, and it's because I can do these things, but it's not, I can't do those things. And so trying to get students to be better and more fluent at being able to advocate for themselves, what I am, what I'm not quite yet, and why. And so we started this process and then tried to identify some of the issues that are still areas of need, and then to identify some of the challenges that are causing those things to be areas of need, and then sort of the what if section. What if we did this or that? So I'll just give you a couple examples. You've heard us talk about, in response to intervention, RTI. It's kind of loosely developed around 3 tiers. Tier 1 would be all instruction, so I'm not going to reserve some pieces of instruction for you and not for you. Tier 1 would be everybody gets it. But if everybody gets it, we know that not everybody hears it in the same way, so we have to really work on differentiating instruction so that how I speak to Chair Barnes, because of what her needs and strengths are, is different than Vice Chair Schneider, because his needs are a little bit different, but we're all in the same class. And so one of the challenges that we continue to face, and this isn't a real surprise, is that we need to continue to work with teachers on differentiating instruction, because it's easier said than done. So that's one of the challenges. And then along with that is we have a literacy block that's been the same length for a certain amount of time, and we've added different things. So one of the things that we're beginning to wonder about is extending the literacy block. And so those are the kinds of, that's the kind of work we've been doing. No decisions made yet, but I want the board and the community to understand that these are, we don't rest and say because we've worked on this, we're done. We keep trying to go back and to kind of refine. Another example, if tier 1 is whole group, tier 2 would be sort of, let's say, for lack of a better way to say it, small group instruction based on an area of need that a certain number of students kind of have in common. And then you kind of work with students in that way. However, we have some limited options around those kinds of interventions that we can do at tier 2. And so what additional options might we have? What additional things do we do now? What things do we do now that we can maybe streamline, build efficiencies into? So we're looking at, for instance, creating a consistent intervention and extension block across all schools. And sometimes what that means is that special educators who only work with students who are identified might begin to work with other students. That's called porous borders, all hands on deck. That has implications for how people are scheduled and so on. Again, just ideas, putting things out, but wanting to try to maximize all the resources that we have for students. And then another area that we really have been working on is integration of content, and so that we're not teaching in a silo, but how we continue to support teachers who, especially at the elementary grades, who are generalists. And so rather than just, we move to science, we move to social studies, how do we sort of more integrate so that the students can learn the way the brain works, which is trying to seek patterns and connections. And so that's hard work, and it's hard work for teachers. Teachers do really good stuff, and if we can continue to help them in professional development around integrating their instruction and then doing it in the spirit of inquiry, which we've talked to the board about for a long time now, really trying to get what-if questions, and don't provide answers too quickly. Let the students play and work, and sometimes get the answer wrong, and trying to have our students and our parents and our community recognize that sometimes getting an answer wrong is actually one of the best ways to grow and to learn, because you just begin to process and work through things. And if we can sort of temper our impulse to fill in the blank, or to just kind of not be comfortable with wait time, and allow a young learner to work through a problem, and then to work through what didn't go right and learn from that. That's somewhat counter to the way a lot of teachers like to work, but and that's all a good instinct, but we're working to help them feel more comfortable with that. So broadly, those are two areas that we've been working on. In addition to, I've shared with you science implementation work. You're going to see phys ed and health coming to you pretty soon. Social studies and world language are still apace, so about that. Nothing much to report. We're just still working there. But these are two things that I thought was time to share with you, and we'll have more to say later on. But at least now, when we do say it later on, you'll have heard it at least once prior. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mark? Seeing none. More to come. So we are on to item number 9, which is the planning board recommendations based on the review of the school district's 2019 capital improvement plan. I turn it over to Marge.
Thank you. So I want you to know on February 19th, Matt and I went before the planning board to lay out for them the capital improvement plan that was revised by you on February 4th. And I was very pleased that particular night. Matt gave a lot of detail to all the projects that we have forthcoming for 2019, 2020, especially focused on the parking lot redo, if you will, for James Master Cole Elementary School and the upper elementary school. A focus on the boilers to be replaced at Master Cole Elementary School. And then a lot of talk was given to the field upgrade. I was really, really pleased this time. We've gone to the planning board year after year, and this time there was just really a great discussion between planning board members and us. And I really want Matt to weigh in if he has additional things to say, but I will just tell you that they were quite supportive of the turf field and asked questions. I mean, we obviously said the plan was going to come before you on March 18th, so we didn't have a lot to say. But what these members realized is that a grass field is difficult to play on when you've got so many sports and everybody wants the same area. And they also realized there's just not a lot of athletic fields in town. So I really felt they affirmed the stand that the board had taken. And also I would say that they were really pleased to see your commitment in an outlying year to providing a sidewalk on O'Gara Drive, because as you know, there's a town center committee, and the town center committee is committed to providing as many sidewalks as possible to get people to take advantage of this particular part of Merrimack, or what would be known as more the town center area. So it was just a very positive engagement. And at the very end, just as we had concluded, a motion was made, which you can see here in the last column, for them to say everything that you had listed as being necessary was necessary. There was no debate at all. And in fact, they just were affirming what it is that you had done. I thought it was a very positive evening. Would you say such, Matt?
Yes, I would agree.
Are there any questions on the planning board presentation? Andy?
So just out of curiosity, one of the reasons that we moved the track on the CIP to this year, turf field, is largely because the parents brought this forward as a, do they feel that it was appropriately placed from a timing perspective? Because that wasn't our original placement.
They understood that it got moved basically because there were a group of parents who very much wanted this to happen at this time, and due to the lack of fields and so on, it seemed, even though it was a lot of money, and of course there was Matt could only talk in terms of the fact that an engineer had been contacted to do some planning. They understood all that. It was almost as if they just realized the situation we found ourselves in, and the fact that it is very difficult to go and play these sports in other places based on Merrimack pride and safety and so on. So, yeah, Andy, they understood that this was not your original intent, but that in fact it was a petition warrant article that was coming forward, and you in fact had affirmed what it was that the parents wanted to do. I think there was complete understanding, but more, Matt, wouldn't you say, the fact that it just needs to happen because there's not much else that can be done. I mean, and especially, I think it was Alistair
Yes, correct.
that drives a school bus, not for our district, but for another district. And he gets around a lot, so he was making a comment on what he sees when he goes around, and talked in terms of how many high schools in this area have a turf field. And he understood completely why Merrimack would want one. In fact, I think he said he would speak openly about that
Yeah,
if
correct.
he had the opportunity, which we just have not gotten those kinds of comments in the past. So I found us to be in this dialogue back and forth about all these projects, and it was more conversational than us just doing
The
a presentation. Mhm.
Any other questions or comments on planning board night? Excellent. Seeing none, we'll go on to the housekeeping portion of our program. Item number 10, which is the approval of the February 15th, 2019 minutes, non-public minutes, and February 18th, 2019 public minutes. I'll entertain a motion. Made by Cinda, seconded by Naomi. Are there any edits to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0. On to item number 11, which is the acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000 with Matt.
Thank you. This evening we have to the Merrimack School District from the Health Trust, received by the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee, to be used for work site health and safety activities to benefit district employees. The sum of $3,000 to be used to send six designated health and safety coordinators for the district to attend a full-day training session. So, from the Health Trust to the Merrimack School District.
Entertain a motion? Made by somebody, please. Andy?
I move we accept the gift from the Health Trust for $3,000 with our gratitude.
Is there a second? Seconded by Brandy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0. On to item number 12, which is consent with Mark.
So I have the following educator retirements and resignations on consent tonight. Barbara Danute, social studies teacher at Merrimack Middle School. Helen Fitzgerald, tech integrator at Merrimack Middle School and Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. And Kimberly Newcomb, language arts coordinator at Mastrocola Elementary School.
Cinda?
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Seconded by Brandy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0. On to item number 13, which is other correspondence. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? Andy?
I had several parents reach out asking about graduation date, as well as tentative end of school date, of which I was saying it's Mother Nature plays hardball in March and April, so we don't know the actual last day of school yet until the dust settles.
Correct. Right now, it's tentative for Tuesday, June 18th.
Excellent.
And just a question, is it a full day or a half day for that last day of school? What's the,
That's yet to be determined.
okay, thanks.
Is there any other correspondence? Seeing none, are there any comments from the board? I have one, and that is, I always, when we get our updates in our packet, want to let the public know that in, the suburban legend of declining enrollments, we have actually netted 28 students in the district since the first day of school. So, is there any other comment? Seeing none, new business or any new business to come before the board? Marge?
The new business I have, I suppose it could have been under a comment, but I want to state that today, Bridie Bellamere, the principal of Thorntons Ferry Elementary School, was named the executive director of the New Hampshire Association of School Principals to begin on July 1st, which means that we will have an opening for a principalship, and that we will be working on in the future. But the more important thing is the announcement was made today, and that should be in the record.
Thank you, Mart. And is there any other new business? Seeing none. Committee reports. Is there any committee reports? We'll start with Chris.
So the robotics team went to its first competition this Saturday. We did pretty well. I think we came in 15th overall, and we were with the 4th Seed Alliance. And the celebration of song is tomorrow, the chorus concert with all the choruses in the school. And then the band's large group festival is this Friday.
Excellent. And next week is the Cavalcade of Bands.
Next week is Cavalcade, yeah.
And it's on Thursday. Am I getting that right? You have to show up. I mean, I'm
I have
optional,
to show
but
up.
I look forward to it. I
I'm
really do.
supposed to know what it is. I think it's Thursday.
Yep.
Yeah,
There you
okay.
go. 28th. Cinda.
Is empty bowls this year? Do you know? Does anyone?
No, I don't know.
It's every other year, and I can't remember if this is.
I think it was
another
last year.
year. Okay.
Excellent. Are there any other committee reports? So we'll go Brandy.
Just from Parks and Rec, they did a survey, and the results are going to be posted, I believe, after Wednesday's meeting. So stay tuned for that. They are filling up summer camps, believe it or not, pretty quickly. So if you're interested in having your child attend summer camp at Natticook or the other Merrimack summer camps, feel free to go on Parks and Rec website and start signing up your children.
Excellent. Other committee reports? We have Andy.
So, about an hour and a half, well, it's longer than that now. Earlier this afternoon, we had the monthly Ceres Board of Directors meeting. The note of interest there is that aside from the business continuing to be moving in the positive direction for the Ceres charter of providing services, that's good. But also their decision was made, they're advertising for a program director for Ceres to work with all the different programs as well as find ways to move to the next level for Ceres. So sort of exciting, they're advertising for a new position. The other committee report is Planning and Building Committee. They met last Monday, a week ago, and they are now working very actively on the charge that the school board gave them around the SAU SPED consolidation. They are pulling together all of the different plans that have been done to date. And also, I acted on their behalf for their request to work with Matt to come up with a proposal for what would be to have a semi-engineered structure on the Brentwood property, assuming that the Brentwood building wasn't on that property, to see what that option would be. And that goes in addition to the current plan that's in existence to reuse part of the Brentwood building for an SAU SPED refurbished and added onto, and that as well as some of the older ones. So they're working, they're meeting again, I believe, next Monday to follow up on that. I would imagine later in April or early in May, you're going to be seeing them come to this board to share their research, their pros and cons, and their suggestions on what we should do. So,
Thank you. Healthcare Cost Containment Committee met on the 6th of March, and we actually got into an area that we don't cover a lot, which is dental. And it's an area where I think, as far as maximizing the benefits, knowing, how to get the most of your benefits, that was covered. And also we had a presentation about habits, how to break them and how to form them. So they're always doing a kind of a wellness, something, teach the teacher, train the trainer. So that was all good. And we also recapped the wellness fair, and it was a great success. So that's what we had. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, going on to public comments on agenda items. Absolutely. Just need to state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, Richard Foote, 129 Indian Rock Road. My question is about the report card thingies you're talking about. It sounds very much to me like you're going overboard with report cards. To me, in my day, you had your parent-teacher conferences. I have no idea if they still have those. I have no children, so I have no idea. But in my day, you had those parent-teacher conferences, down with the parents, and they said, Johnny needs to work on his reading skills or his math skills or something like that. Okay, we'll make sure Johnny works on those things. And that was the extent. And now it seems like you have to go, you're doing that all over again, but not really doing that parent-teacher conference thing again or anymore. I mean, I said I don't understand, so I don't really know if that's done anymore or not. But that was always the big thing. You talk with the teachers and parent got together, said, got to work on this, and the parents go home, beat the kid, and say, do better on that or else. And you got better at things. So I'm just kind of curious how this works nowadays. They still have parent-teacher conferences, or are those not really things that are done anymore?
Mr. Fed, I'm just going to give you a clarifier. Parent-teacher conferences are down K to 12, pre-K to 12, actually. So those are not, in report cards are as old as since we've made paper.
Okay, so if you still have this reporting thing, seems like, to me at least, that you're doing the same thing twice. You're still having your conferences saying this is what your child needs to work on to improve their skills. You got a C last quarter, and we really like to see my child get up to an A. So we know he's got to work on these things to hopefully get to that A. If the teacher has had this conference with the parents and says your child's going to work on these things now, the report card saying that you got a C seems like you're beating a dead horse at this point. You're saying your report card, you're going to report to the teachers what you already had during the conference, saying that your child has to work on these things to hopefully get better during the course of the semester. And so it's like, what's the point? You're having your parent-teacher conferences still, but then you're going to send the teachers or the parents home a letter or something saying that, explain why they got a C. Presumably the parents have talked with the teacher and understand why your child only got a C and didn't get a B or an A in the class. So it's kind of curious, what's the point of doing this if you're still having these conferences to do these things?
We'll always have report cards, and it's part of your student transcript, and parent-teacher conference is a dialogue on how you can support your child at home to do better on those report cards. So, and they don't happen the same time. They happen different times of the year. So you're not going to get a parent-teacher conference and a report card in the same week.
Well, yeah, obviously you have that, but the parents have a conference, and if the report card came out and you got a C on something, and then your conference is a week later, a month later, whenever that might be. I don't recall when it was when I was a kid, but you still have those conferences. So by the next reporting period, presumably the teachers have met with the parents, and have explained why Johnny got a C instead of a B or an A. That by the next quarter, Johnny's going to be working on those things to improve his grade for the next quarter, or whenever that next reporting period comes up. So again, it's like you have these different things going on here, and you're reporting back to the parents more than, here's your report card and you had your conference, now we're going to give you a letter also explaining why. I think at least that's what it sounded like to me with the reporting process of your card and everything. And maybe I don't understand what the whole process of the thing is anymore, but it seems like the parent-teacher conferences are the big thing. They tell you why your child did this in class, and now your parents are going to work with their child to see if they can improve on these things. So, my thoughts at least.
Thank you, Mr. Foote. We will take a moment to sign the manifest because we're out of public. So, and I will entertain a motion to go to non-public per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, section C. Made by somebody who's leaving me hanging. Cinda, seconded by Andy. Brandy, how do you vote?
In favor?
Naomi?
In favor?
Cinda?
In favor.
Andy?
In favor?
And I vote in favor. The motion carries 500. Thank you and good night.